The Security and Exchange Commission has disowned last Friday's annual general meeting of the Tourist Company of Nigeria (TCN) PLC that led to the change in the leadership of the board, warning that any resolution passed at the meeting are null and void. This is contained in a public notice by the Commission. Welcome to Business Point, where we x-ray the Nigerian economy and the government policies. I am Kike Lomo Okeri. The Security and Exchange Commission has condemned the recent action by some majority shareholders of the Tourist Company of Nigeria (TCN), who allegedly convened meeting in defense of a suspension order issued by Security Exchange Commission. The Commission says the meeting also resulted in an unauthorized changes to the company's board, including the removal of SEC-appointed interim director and the board secretary. The Commission described the move as illegal and disruptive. The Commission noted that its intervention in TCN, including the appointment of 2 interim independent directors, was aimed at preserving the company's status as a growing concern and safeguarding the interests of all shareholders, particularly minority investors. It added that the intervention had already yielded stability and a rebound in the company's share value before the recent disruption. The Commission noted that the recent step taken by the majority shareholders are poised to thwart the gains already made by the said regulatory intervention, which had brought stability into the companies and returned its shares to positive value. The Commission, by this notice, informed the general public and all stakeholders that TCN PLC remain under the Commission's regulatory involvement. The Commission does not recognize the purported annual general meeting of TCN PLC of July 25, 2025, held in clear disregard of an express directive from the Commission and in contravention of extant law governing such meeting. The Commission shall accordingly discountenance and resolution passed in the said meeting until all legacy issued are fully resolved, noting that the board of TCN PLC remains as constituted prior to the purported AGM, and the SEC-appointed independent directors would remain on the board of TCN PLC to ensure good governance, stability, the protection of minority investors, and ultimately maintain an orderly and fair market. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) has upgraded its forecast for Nigerian economic growth to 3.4% in 2025. The new forecast represents 0.4 percentage points from 3.0% forecast of the IMF in April this year. Similarly, the IMF raised its forecast for the country's economic growth for 2026 to 3.2%, representing 0.5 percentage points from 2.7% in April. The IMF announced the new forecast in its World Economic Outlook July 2025 edition, which also shows an upward review of the forecast for global economic growth to 3.0% for 2025 and 3.1% for 2026. The new forecast for global economic growth for 2025 represents an increase of 0.2 percentage points compared to the reference forecast in April 2025 World Economic Outlook. While the outlook for the 2026 is up by 0.1 percentage points, in the same vein, the IMF raised its forecast for the sub-Saharan African region to 4.0% for 2025 and 4.3% for 2026, representing 0.2 percentage points and 0.1 percentage point increase from 3.8% and 4.2% respectively projected in April 2025 by the World Economic Outlook. IMF says growth is expected to be relatively stable in 2025 in sub-Saharan Africa at 4.0% before picking up to 4.3% in 2026. Commenting on the new forecast for the Nigerian economic growth, Tunde Abidoye, head of equity research, FBN Quest Merchant Bank, says the IMF forecast of the 3.4% is precisely in line with the in-house view based on the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics data points. Banks, insurance companies and other financial institutions will henceforth report monthly transactions above 25 million naira for individuals and 100 million naira for firms to the tax authorities. This directive was contained in the Nigerian Tax Administration Act NTAA Section 29 titled Information to be Delivered by Bankers and Others. The NTAA is among the new tax law which will come into effect from January 2026. The new law also includes the Nigerian Tax Act 2025, and the law stated that without prejudice to Section 124 of this Act, every bank, insurance company, stockbroking firm, or other financial institution shall prepare with or without demand by the relevant tax authority quarterly returns to the relevant tax authority specifying the name and addresses of new customers and existing customers in the case of an individual or transaction where the cumulative transaction in the month amounts to 25 million naira or more. Body corporate or transaction where the cumulative transaction in a month amounts to 100 million naira or more. Furthermore, the NTAA also stipulates that banks and other financial institutions will act as third-party debt recovery agents. The Act stated that the tax authority may transfer the responsibility for tax debt recovery to a third party only when all legal avenues have been exhausted. The Act further stated that third-party agents will also be deployed if debt is of significant value. The relevant tax authority may assign outstanding tax debt in whole or in part to an accredited third party who shall assume responsibility for recovering the tax debt in accordance with the provision of this Act or regulations issued by the service. Nigerian export earning hit a record high of 77.4 trillion naira in 2024, but this headline figure hides a deeper concern. Export performance in dollar terms has plunged by nearly 48% over the last decades. Experts says this reflects a dangerous illusion of growth driven by currency devaluation and weak institution capacity. Research analysis shows that between 2014 and 2024, Nigerian export value in naira terms jumped by 375.09%, rising from 16.3 trillion naira to 77.44 trillion naira. However, in dollar terms, export earnings fell sharply by 47.53%, dropping from $69.09 billion to $50.42 billion. A decline largely driven by an 805.13% depreciation of the naira during the period. This stark divergence highlights how currency devaluation has inflated local export values while eroding real dollar earning. Yet, analysts warn that FX volatility is just one part of a deeper structural dysfunction. Nigeria remains heavily reliant on crude oil, making export vulnerable to global price shock and output disruption. This vulnerability is further worsened by structural constraints such as pipeline vandalism, outdated infrastructure, and stalled upstream projects like Bonga South, West Aparo, and Zabazaba Etan, which compound the challenge. Non-oil exports have not been fared better. Growth is held back by poor logistic insecurity, a weak industrial base, and inconsistent policies. External shock like COVID-19 and global commodity volatility have worsened the situation. Reforms such as exchange rate unification and trade liberalization are step forward, but without deeper structural changes and target investment in agriculture, manufacturing, and mine. Experts fears Nigeria will continue to post inflated naira figures while real dollar earnings shrink. These are the key drivers of the Nigerian export decline. Crude oil dependence, which still contributes over 90% of export earning, output constrained by theft and underinvestment. Exchange rate distortion, a steep naira depreciation inflated nominal figures but marks real dollar losses. Weak non-oil base, non-oil export declined to 60.7% in USD despite naira gains. Infrastructure gaps, power shortage, bad road and poor congestion hamper productivities and logistics. In terms of security, agricultural and industrial output is suffering, especially in the north. Structural reality behind the data. Crude oil export fell by 61.44% in dollar terms from $70.08 billion in 2014 to $27.02 billion in 2024. Non-oil exports declined sharply in dollar terms despite a 250% rise in naira terms. Per capita GDP dropped from $3,020 to $840 over the decade. The export data underscores the urgent need for Nigerians to pivot away from oil dependence and build a more diversified, competitive export base. This includes reviving agriculture, manufacturing, and mining, all of which are underperforming despite Nigerian natural advantages. The national strategy built on institutional reform, infrastructure investment, and inclusive policies is essential to secure sustainable growth. All right, let's take a quick short break. We will be right back. Don't go away. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Business Point, where we extract the Nigerian economy and the government policies. Nigeria has committed $538.05 million to the first phase of Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone program and unveiled a youth-driven 10-year strategic plan to transform its agricultural sector. According to the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, Stanley Ukocha, spokesman, says in a statement that the Vice President spoke at a high-level dialogue with African youth agri-food entrepreneurs and leaders in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, at the United Nations Food System Summit Stocktake. While addressing the plenary session on transforming food system in complex setting, Shettima disclosed that Nigeria has already committed $538.05 million to the first phase of the Special Agro-Industry Processing Zone program. He described the SABS as a flagship initiative at boosting agricultural productivity, improving rural livelihood, and accelerating agro-industrialization. The SARS program in Nigeria is being implemented in partnership with the African Development Bank, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and the Islamic Development Bank and other key development partners. The initiative is projected to attract $1 billion in total investment by 2027, reduce post-harvest losses by 80%, and has already generated over 785,000 jobs across targeted regions. Vice President Shettima added that the African youth hold the key to the continent's agri-food future, and thus no stone should be left unturned in mobilizing this greatest asset. He reiterated the federal government's commitment to tackling food insecurity, noting that the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has declared a state of emergency on food security, reactivating over 500,000 acres of arable land, deployed strategic food reserve, and expanded access to seed and extension service household. Shettima reaffirmed Nigerians' call for increased investment in value addition and agro-processing to end the export of raw commodities and build more resilient local economies. He noted that the forthcoming 10 years action plan will prioritize training, mentorship in agrotechnology and agribusiness with a strong monitoring and evaluation framework. Emphasizing the long-term vision of the initiative, he described it as a generational relay that requires collective action, strategic partners, and unwavering commitment to shared responsibility. Transnational Corporation PLC has recorded a 21% increase in profit before tax to 85.7 billion naira in the first half of 2025 from 70.9 billion naira in the same period of 2024. The increase in profitability was driven by 59% growth in revenue to 279.7 billion naira in the first half from 175.4 billion naira in the first half of 2024 consequently. Transcorp declared an interim dividend of 4.064 billion naira amounting to 40 kobo per share subject to applicable withholding tax. Transcorp Group Chairman Tony Elumelu attributed the performance to strategic execution and strong fundamentals, saying the company is focused on impact-driven investment that strengthens Nigerian economy and deliver long-term value. A key highlight for the period was the launch of 5,000 capacity Transcorp Center in Abuja, now recognized as a premier destination for global conferences, including the recently concluded Afrexim Annual Meetings 2025. With subsidiaries Transcorp Power PLC and Transfarm Power supplying over 20% of Nigeria installed power capacity, and hospitality brand like Transcorp Hilton Abuja, and a digital platform Aura by Transcorp Hotel, Transcorp Group remains a key driver of the economic transformation in Nigeria. All right, this is where we call it a wrap on Business Point today. Join me again on Global Television tomorrow on channel 365 on DSTV and 276 on Star Time. To stay connected, kindly follow us on all our social media platforms at Global TV NG. Till I come your way again, I am Kike Lomo Okeri. I celebrate you all.